What's up guys, welcome back to another video. My name's Michaela, aka Moe Kickz, and today I'll be showing you guys how I use stencils on custom shoe projects. If that sounds like something you're interested in, then keep on watching. So I already went ahead and prepped my shoe off camera. If you need to learn how to prep your shoes before customizing, I already have a separate video for that, which I will link down below if you're interested in learning. So to make your own stencils from home, you need some type of vinyl cutting machine. I have a Cricut. So what I'm going to do is upload my image and click simple. Since it's only one color, it already has the background removed, but this screen is where you can remove the background yourself. And then you're going to click on cut image because all you're doing is cutting out this image, you're not printing it. You're going to click it and add to canvas and adjust to the size that you need. I already measured out how big I want it on my shoe, which is about 3 inches wide. And then I'm going to duplicate it because both shoes are going to be identical, so I need one for each shoe. And then you're going to click make. Before you start to cut out your stencil, you want to double check and make sure that your dial on your Cricut machine is set to vinyl. This is just what tells your machine what pressure to cut your vinyl at. So I have my stencil cut out now, and I already removed the areas that I want exposed. That way when I paint it and remove the stencil, it's gonna say Raiders. In order to transfer this, you're gonna want to have some transfer tape, and you're gonna squeegee the transfer tape onto the stencil and then carefully remove the backing. Then you're gonna want to transfer it onto your shoe. A little trick that I like to do is heat up the vinyl to kind of melt it into the pores or around the stitching of the shoe. This just helps prevent the paint from seeping underneath the stencil. Now I'm just going to repeat the same steps when I'm doing the Raiders logo. So now that I have my stencil laid down, as you can see, it's not laying down nice and flat. If you left it like this, your paint will go underneath your stencil and it's just not going to look as clean. So to prevent that, you're going to want to take a nice sharp X-Acto knife and cut where each panel meets. So now you can see that by cutting the edges, you can now lay down your stencil flat on each panel and there's no lifting. So the last step that you want to do is take your heat gun and heat the vinyl up so that it melts into the pores of the leather. Again, this is just an extra step that you can do to prevent the paint from getting underneath your stencil. So because I'm airbrushing, the next step that I'm going to do is paint all the edges where each panel meets. This is something that I like to do when I'm airbrushing because sometimes when you're using the airbrush, it doesn't get into these little crevices over here and it kind of leaves almost like a shadow, and then you're going to end up having to touch it up when you're all done. So to just make life easier, do it first. That way in the end you're not doing the touch-ups and it doesn't look uneven or anything like that. So now I'm going to lay down a few thin layers of my first coat, which is gray. If you guys would like a more in-depth tutorial about how to use an airbrush, please let me know down in the comments below and I'll make a video doing that. So here I'm just laying down 2 to 3 thin coats of my first color, and then I'm going to let it dry for a few hours before I start taping off the areas that I want to keep gray and leave certain areas exposed that I want to turn white. So for this specific logo, his face then turns white, but the helmet stays gray, and then the swords behind him are also going to be white. And then on the inner sides of this shoe, this middle panel behind the swoosh will be white as well. So I'm just taping off these areas that I want to keep gray. I'm sure there's an easier way to do this, but this is just the way that I do my stencils. When I'm doing a stencil like this, I like to utilize the original color of the shoe. So for example, this shoe is originally black. So when I lay the stencil down before painting anything, it's keeping those areas black, which is the outline of the logo. Then I sprayed down my first color, which was gray. Then I'm going to cover up the gray areas, and now I'm going to paint my third color, which is white. Now that that's done, I'm going to start peeling away the tape and the stencils to see what kind of touch-ups I need to do. So going in again with the heat gun, it'll kind of soften up your stencil and make it easier to peel off, and also avoid ripping off any of the paint that you just laid down. If you have any issues when pulling off the stencil, like your paint starts to lift or the edges of where the stencil was is not as clean, it could be that you didn't allow enough dry time in between each coat, or that the paint isn't completely dry as you're pulling off the stencil. Now, if you lay down a stencil on top of an area that you had painted previously, softening up the vinyl with the heat gun will then prevent the paint from lifting up when you peel off the stencil. You do want to be careful though when you do this, because you don't want to end up burning any of the paint or burning the leather itself. I did have a problem one time where I had dyed the sock line fabric, and as I was trying to heat set it with the heat gun, it ended up starting to burn the fabric. So you really want to be careful when you use one of these. So now that everything's peeled off, you can see where I need to do some touch-ups. I need to paint the edges of these panels. I need to touch up the logo as well. And eventually you'll notice that the shade of gray ends up changing. Once I have everything peeled off and I see all the colors next to each other, I'm noticing that the gray has too much of a blue tone to it, and I end up changing it. So I end up going in with Angelus Direct's light gray. Instead, I was using this other gray before that looked right to me when I first laid it down. Again, once I had all the colors together, I noticed like it just looked very blue. So, you know, mistakes happen, and sometimes you have to take that extra time to fix your mistake. I didn't want to end up sending these to the customer and they look at it and they're realizing like that this doesn't match any of their Raider gear because it's more blue than it is gray. So as you can see, there's like a total difference. Again, I didn't realize how blue it looked until it all came together. So I'm glad I fixed that before I went any further. And now I'm going to go in and touch up the logo and the edges of the panels. You always want to paint your edges. It just makes the whole project look so much more clean, as if it came this way, and it looks very professional. If you have any messed up or bent brushes lying around, save them. Never throw away your brushes because they can be used for certain aspects of your projects. So for example, this brush is kind of curved at the tip of it, which works perfectly when you're painting edges like this. So now that everything's touched up and I've changed the gray to the correct gray on both of the shoes, I'm going to go in with the bandana pattern. The final step you want to do before spraying down your top coat is peel off the tape and make sure that there are no touch-ups that need to be done along the midsole. When you peel the tape off your midsole, you realize that there's some areas where the leather meets the midsole and it needs to be painted, so you want to fix it before doing your top coat. Sometimes when you take the tape off, it leaves some sticky residue to it. You want to get these like rubber cement erasers, I think is what they're called. I'll link it down below in the description, but it takes off the sticky residue easily. So here I'm just pointing out all the areas that need to get touched up along the midsole, which I'm going to do off camera. And now finally, the absolute last step is adding your top coat. I like to go in with Liquid Kickz flat top coat, and I use the airbrush for that. It can also be brushed on as well. I just like doing everything with the airbrush because it lays down nice and even. Again, if you guys would like a tutorial on how to use and clean your airbrush, let me know in the comments down below, and I will make that video in the future. you're interested in ordering any custom shoes from me, I will leave a link down below where you can fill out a request form and I'll reach out by email. If you guys have any questions, leave them down below in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe, and stay tuned for my next video where I'll be making some Mexican clay inspired custom shoes.